Hey, everybody, welcome back to the next episode of the Legacy Liftoff podcast. I'm your host, Cody Retlick, and today with me is Randall Warnas, CEO of Anzu Robotics. Randall, thanks for being here today, man.
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure. It's always nice to be talking to new faces and share a little bit more about what's going on in my world as well as what's going on in the drone world. And yeah, thanks for sharing your platform for the purpose of me sharing a little bit of my thoughts on it.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. And I know you've been a busy guy, all over the place. So I know happy to finally connect. I was hoping to get to AUVSI this year, but had some stuff come up, unfortunately, that we weren't wasn't able to connect. But I know I'd seen you there in some spots, so wanted to connect a little bit after. Um, as I mentioned before, this podcast is I really don't want to get into the weeds of everything that's going on in your world, in the drone industry and everything, but I do want to touch on some of it. But the main purpose of my podcast is, again, as always, is to tell your story. And like from the beginning of however far you want to go back, like learning about you, because I know you just made a
Sure.
post about how you think you just kind of right fell into this industry.
Right.
But like where did it all start? Because I know you worked at FLIR and you worked at, obviously the former CEO of Autel, but like how did you get to where you're at? And like give us where it started and kind of some transition points of how you fell into it.
Yeah. Okay, so you're gonna get a little bit of like further back than maybe you anticipated, but I think that it's important, especially for telling kind of who I am and how I ended up here. Both of my parents are immigrants. My mom's from France, and my dad's from the Netherlands. Immigrated, a long time ago before I was born, obviously. So I'm a first generation American and grew up uh like kind of in the hood. It wasn't the best area. My junior high school is rated an F or got an F grade for quality of education. So I was around like a lot of like drugs and like kind of out of control teens, gang stuff. That was my upbringing. And my mom was a genealogist and now is a translator for the Department of Homeland Security and does stuff in courts for folks. But my dad was had the same job from the time from when he was 17 to when he retired last November. He's a commercial plumber, no college education, no way to like really mentor or guide me down like what I would do with my life. So I was always kind of like someone that had a little more am, ambitions, maybe not the right word, but like looking around my peers, I would always feel like I wasn't on the same path. I did see myself doing more, but didn't know how to do more. So I started out at a community college late, like 2 years after I graduated high school. I was kind of in the I was working for a record label and also a record store early out of high school, and thought like the music path was like something really interesting for me. Anyways, started at community college, had good grades, transferred to a commuter college, had a 4.0, transferred to the University of Utah where I ended up getting my bachelor's degree. Um, Working full time, taking like 19 credit hours, like full time and a half on school. I was like grinding. And I knew I could grind hard and I always got good grades. So whatever I could measure myself up against, my peers always felt very comfortable with where I placed. But I still had no mentorship. So there was this one professor and he told me one day, he said, like, you really need to look into grad school. Didn't even understand what the hell that meant, really. And so I applied to some schools, or I had a list of schools I wanted to apply to, and he's like, "No, you're going to apply to like the best schools." So I ended up applying to 9 schools, got into 8 of them: Harvard, Yale, London School of Economics, Oxford, Cambridge. I ended up going to American University, but I didn't get into the University of Indiana for whatever reason. But I started feeling like I had this momentum, this kid that like had no business being in these places. I was like, I built up my credentials enough to get accepted into this world where when I went to grad school, I still didn't feel like I fit in. It was kids that came from a pedigree of college educated parents, or being pushed down the road to do law school or something like that, and I still like didn't know how I fit. But continued to get good grades. I continued to excel, in comparison to my peers. I was the student trustee at American University, which I represented all 13, 14,000 students at the university on the board of trustees. And I started just seeing that, like, whenever I put myself in a position to get chosen for something or to get picked, I kept getting picked, and it was a weird sensation for me because I always kind of kept it real. I always felt like I didn't talk like everybody else. I didn't try hard to be that kind of person. And so all of that led to this culmination of things, which was I did 70 years of education for political science and international affairs to do intelligence for the US government. And then I ended up getting accepted to officer candidate school for the US Navy. In the period of time from grad school and when I went to officer candidate school, I met two guys in Vegas that said, we're starting a drone company, or we want to start a drone company. And so I met with them thinking that we were talking military drones. And they put a Phantom 1, which I have one right behind me, right there, on a table, and they basically said, we want to start a drone retail store. I had never flown a drone before. I didn't know anything about this kind of drone, but I was like, yeah, I got time to kill. So we started the first brick and mortar store in Las Vegas in June of 2024, which yesterday was the 10-year anniversary of starting that whole endeavor. Um, and then, things just kind of got weird. So I guess for people that don't know the story beyond that, we opened up 15 locations within 9 months across North America. I had 60 employees. We were doing about $1.4 million a month. Like we were growing this thing that was not really seen before. And we also had some of the earliest adopters of consumer drone technology that were trying to figure out how to make it a commercial tool. So like I said, we had 15 locations, and then DJI reached out one time and said, hey, we want to start a chain of DJI stores. So I sold my shares to my partners, ended up going to Shenzhen, joining DJI. And when I arrived there, they said, look, we're not really wanting to do the store thing right now, but we have this partnership with FLIR, and we're thinking about what we could do with that. So in October of 2015, DJI Enterprise as a concept was born, and December of 2015 is when DJI Enterprise was launched. At that time, I was forced to create an entire reseller channel of commercial drones, which had never really existed before. Had to educate people on aerial thermal imaging and how the Zenmuse XT was really the departure away from taking these toys and turning them into a tool. And thermal in 2015, people are like, "What? What does it
Right.
do?"
Didn't
And
exist.
yeah, and now thermal is like it's how you differentiate a commercial drone from a non-commercial drone. It's a necessity for any drone manufacturer, and so I felt really proud and grateful to have been part of really pioneering how aerial thermal imaging has taken root in the commercial drone space. I was at FLIR for 4.5 years, like you mentioned, the CEO of Autel for a very brief period of time, and then after the Autel breakup, which it's I stood by principles that maybe some people would have let some things go, but for me, hiring nine of my favorite people in the drone industry to have a guy in China tell me you got to fire one of them after 5 weeks, pulling him from his job where he was comfortable, I was like not going to do it. So I ended up just being like, if you're going to make me, you know, turn on one of my guys, you're going to eventually make me turn on all of them, and I just couldn't
Right.
stand for that. So up here is the Drone Life article when I became CEO of Autel, and it was a very proud moment for me because like I went from running a business at FLIR and feeling like that was a really cool thing to being the CEO of the second largest drone manufacturer in the world. And I never really saw myself as that person, or I thought, maybe in my 50s I'd be like at that level. But
Yeah.
being 34 at the time, I think that it was just like, oh, I can do this, and I do have good ideas, and I can lead a team, and I do have good culture when it comes to how we grow a business. But when that didn't work, I got super depressed. I just didn't know where you go from there. I had already been at a lot of the larger manufacturers, and so I went through 3 years of just trying to figure out like what is there left for me to do. And I worked for smaller manufacturers in different parts of the world, and it just never really felt like it was me. I always wanted my fingerprints on things, and so that's where Anzu Robotics was born a couple months ago, a little more than 8 weeks ago, officially. But yeah, it really allows me to work with some of the best technology in the world, work with the reseller network I built back in 2015, work with the end users that I've been representing or working with all along, work with the software developers pretty much across around the world that want to make these drones do more. The only thing is now there's this legislative angle of it, which fits into my political science background, but at the same time, it's definitely not where, you don't want to have to fight that
Right.
fight. You're really just trying to make the best product you can and have the best business around it. But now there's this whole other layer of things to be considered, and it's been interesting to navigate for sure over the
Yeah.
last 8 weeks.
Right, no doubt. And I mean, it's so fluid right now, too. Things are changing, obviously, from when we're recording this to when it's going to be released. Things might
Yeah.
change dramatically, right? I mean, and the language might change. Obviously they voted a couple days ago now, so it's crazy to see that. But there's a lot to unpack there. And I love this story because obviously there's a lot of life lessons too to just take out of it. Like you didn't, you knew that one, you had that self belief early on that it's like you kind of felt that you weren't on a typical path of maybe your surroundings early on, and you kind of knew that there was a better way to really do things. I can empathize with like your family too, of like just one go getter side of things, and one just say doing the same thing for a very long time, and
Mm.
mentality from that perspective. And I do want to kind of just take a step back and kind of unpack a little bit some of the other stuff of like, you know, going to school and understanding that, maybe poli sci wasn't the thing or whatever it was that kind of led you towards the retail jump. Like, did you like? I know you said you weren't doing a whole lot at the time when they came to you and was like, "Hey, we want to start these retail stores." But like, do you
Yeah.
remember of like, "Hey, why take that leap at that time?" Like, did you believe that it was truly like something that, hey, I can see the writing on the wall of drones, like, okay, what are we going to do with drones, or how that technology is going to evolve? But is there a moment where you're like, hey, this is why I want to do this, or is like, why that leap at that point?
Oh, so you're talking about when I started the Drones Plus retail
Yeah,
store?
yep, yeah, exactly, yep.
So, I mean, it was really like I was living in Vegas, being close to, so I could be close to family and had nothing better to do. It really came down to that. And that's why I say, like, why I ended up here, it wasn't logical. It was just like, met some guys by chance, said yes to a thing, didn't know what it was going to become, but then it just exploded. I mean, we were, at the time you could sell things on like Amazon and eBay. We were number one on eBay, number two on Amazon. Like we were selling tons of drones to people. And I was in the middle of it, and I would be sent to a new city. One time I was sent to New Orleans on a Saturday. I set up interviews all day. By the end of the day, I hired a store manager. We went to like Home Depot, got all the stuff we felt like we needed to set up that store, like tables and whatever. Uh, got bought a Mac for a point of sale system at Best Buy, and we started operating that drone location within 3 days. And
Nice.
that was my life. I was traveling to new cities and just setting up new drone stores. My employees liked me, trusted me, so like we were just trying to figure out how to best serve customers when there wasn't a lot, like there wasn't a guidebook. We were writing it, as we went. And I think it was just so exciting for me to be a part of something new like that, that the stable, I never wanted to be like a part of sales. I never wanted to worry about revenue. Like that was, I didn't want that. That's why I
Yeah.
wanted to go into intelligence and political science. Is that it wasn't something that I felt comfortable with. But when I ended up going to the Navy, I went to officer candidate school. I was 28 at the time. You have to sign 8 years of your life away, basically. And 3 weeks in, my whole being started rejecting the idea of losing my identity and like conforming, and like I just got super stressed, and like I could do it, but I just like there was stuff for me waiting back home. I felt super guilty. I felt, so many things. Like 7 years of your life, you build up to this thing, and then you're like, this isn't really going to work. And you
Yeah.
throw all of that away. You have this student loan debt and all that stuff, and you're like, was it worth it? I don't know. But what I went back to was 10 years into a career which has been beyond anything I could have imagined in this space. And like, I, I've been lucky to be in the places I've been, the companies I've worked for, and the vantage points that I've seen in this space. And I feel like the companies really are what allowed me to rise to that level, because if I
Yep.
were working at smaller organizations, no matter like how fun or cool or interesting a person can be, it doesn't mean anything. I've worked for organizations that weren't as flashy, and you definitely lose that shine. You wonder if people even care. So the
Yep.
organizations have really been my what the opportunity, how I've been able to grab hold of that opportunity. But the thing that I feel has been kind of my secret sauce is that I don't forget where I've come from. I don't forget that, the people, your first customer is just important as your million. And I can talk in terms of millions when it comes to DJI and stuff like that. But like, that's why I go into everything treating everyone the same way, is because when we get, sorry, I'm jumping all over the place.
No,
We
it's all
got
good. I love it.
2,400 leads in the first 3 weeks of Anzu Robotics through our website. I took it so seriously to write every single one of those people that I'm on vacation or I'm sick or it's like nighttime and I got two young kids and I'm like, nah, I have to respond to all of these, because I can't act as though this will sustain forever.
Right.
And these are people that are coming to me wanting a solution, and I have to treat them as if they're all, the largest organizations coming to me, even if it's a small drone service provider, even if it's someone just looking for a hobby drone and I'm going to end up disappointing them. I treat it all the same, and I have trained myself to do that, because I realize that some of these people are just looking for guidance. They're just looking for mentorship. They're just looking for genuine help. And a lot of places in the space, you won't get that. And I want to
Yep.
stand apart from other manufacturers, or just other individuals, that my MO is always be present, always be available, say yes to more things than I probably should. And rolling that way has done me a lot of good over those 10 years.
Hey, and I love that mindset. I'm the same way. I think it's people love people that they like and they buy from people that they like, but they also
Right.
like collaboration over competition. I mean, I've said it so many times, being able to really understand what people need and value from your relationship with them, or just writing them letters. I think that's awesome, right? I mean, it just shows you the person, right, that you are, that you want to be able to treat everybody that they're the same and move forward that needle. That's why I was late before. I was hopping on a demo with a pilot as well, because it's just like I still want to do all those hands-on things, learn from people in the industry and understand like what the challenges really are and understand how you can help, if it's just advice or a connection, whatever it is. I think you learn a lot from doing those type of things. So, kudos to you to continue to still do that. I think, never lose that, right? And just keep pushing that forward, because that's what makes a good company, a good person, and just a overall moving things forward in your life, as you value things differently throughout. Because, right, you said you have kids, all that stuff, so it's um, still got to prioritize, but it doesn't take away from that personal touch with actual connections and whatnot. So no, I love the tangent, because it's good to go off in those ways and figure out how your mindset was, or where you're thinking about. But so, like, you're going through this, you're getting out of the Navy, you're understanding like, hey, this is not the route I want to go. Like, you felt it in your core that you didn't want to conform and be someone that maybe you weren't truly are or were wanted
Yep.
to be, right? And it's like, so Fleer kind of that happened and whatnot. How did Autel all start? Like, did you seek
Yeah.
that position out? Did you go did they come after you? Like, you mentioned before that you believed you weren't like that type of guy, or like qualified for that type of position
Yeah.
until you were in it. But like, how did that all happen? Like, give us a
For sure.
background on that.
So when Fleer got acquired by Teledyne, At the time, we were in an interesting place where FLIR and DJI had a long-standing partnership, and then that dissolved due to FLIR being a defense contractor and basically wanting to put distance between them and any Chinese organizations. So uh, it just kind of like what I feel like we had built at FLIR was dissolving to some extent. And then when Teledyne was going to acquire them, there was a question kind of like, well, what are you going to do to invest back into the commercial drone space? And the answer wasn't that convincing that it was going to be taken seriously. I grew the FLIR business substantially over the 4.5 years I was there, and then I was just watching it dwindle with some poor decisions, or at least poor nurturing of that business. So I started looking around, and I reached out to a lot of companies that I'd worked with over the years, and I had a pretty good idea of where I was going to go. And I feel like one of the biggest challenges when you are looking for a job is not spreading yourself too thin, or not giving people expectations, not burning
Mm.
bridges, and not making people feel bad. Because I definitely learned a lot through this leaving FLIR point in my career where I was like, I just wanted to feel secure and I wanted to feel wanted. And so I had
Yeah.
these job offers, and I probably had too many. I probably should have narrowed down before I approached them and just knew what I wanted and what I didn't want. But I just was afraid of not
Mhm.
finding something that worked. So I was going to join a company, and they kind of were like, well, let us know by next week. And then someone from Autel, it was just a recruiter, they were like, hey, we're looking for a VP of sales or something like that. Do you want to chat about it? And I was like, sure, like sounds good. I'll have that conversation. Sorry, I dropped my wedding ring. I play with it
I do
while
too,
I
all
talk,
the
and
time. I do too, all the
I
time,
don't
and
know
it
why.
doesn't fit right.
Anyway, Uh, so anyways, I ended up, so Max Lee, who is now I guess the GM of Autel, but he's the son of the founder, Frank Lee. He was in Utah visiting RMUS to do a flight demo of the Dragonfish when it was very first coming out.
Mm,
And so he was in town, and I was like, let's have lunch. So we go to this barbecue place. And I think over the like 45 minutes, hour that we were there, it's like he said like Frank, his dad, and him wants young leadership. And so instead of being VP of whatever, how would you feel about being CEO? And I was just like, that's kind of crazy. But like, it really only could have happened with a company that isn't about like a board of directors choosing a CEO, or a big like established organization. Autel flies by the seat of its pants to some degree
yeah,
because it is owned by one multi-billionaire and run by his son here.
yeah,
So that's how that happened. And I was just like, how could I say no to that? I would be the CEO of the second largest manufacturer. He wants young leadership. I had ideas. Like I always, from the time I left DJI, I looked at DJI as like a house of cards that has certain things that you could do to really disrupt their market share. And so I went to Autel hoping to do that. And I had this concept. I'll actually show you something. Hold on. So when I started Autel, I bought a bunch of these, which are just cheap magnets. But if you look, it's kind of like the Autel logo.
mhm,
And my idea at Autel, there were two concepts. One is magnetism. So I hired 9 of my favorite people in the drone industry, including people like John McBride, but like others that have either grown their following since, like Bobby Sakaki, or people that were longstanding in the industry, like John or Troy Hiddle, who was at Ag Eagle then and now is the GM of Alistair. Um, Magnetism to a brand where you're just like, I know those guys. I like those guys. They have a good product. Autel's product is great. But like now put a personality around it and you beat DJI, because DJI is void of that warm feeling. They don't
yeah,
talk to you. They don't engage with you. I know they try. People like Chief Wayne Baker that are still there. Great, great dude. People like Romeo Dersher, who left, or Brendan Schulman, or Michael Perry, like great guys, but you're just restrained from being like like you can't
yeah,
say certain things, you can't be certain things. Where Autel, I was like, I'm the CEO, we're going to do this, we're just going to transform it. The second thing that I was going to mention is I have a Lego Adidas shoe right there. So that was another concept that came from this Autel experience, which was, if a drone manufacturer is like a shoe company, what shoe company would you be? And I thought about like Run DMC and the Adidas movement, and it's just kind of
Mhm.
like there's swagger behind it. There's kind of
Yep.
like this, it stands on its own and tells its own story just as a product. And I was like, what if we are just the cool drone brand? Like not only on the consumer side, but on the enterprise side. Like we just make people feel swaggy. We have that swaggy branding. We are in a trade show booth with Adidas track jackets, which I got for every one of my employees at the time because I was like, this is who we're going to be. 9 weeks. That's all I was there for. But
Yep.
I felt like there was this train that would have been riding down those tracks and would have kicked ass in this industry. But it really comes down to there's just a certain distance between Chinese business culture and the US business culture. There's certain respects that you give and certain ways that you treat people. And no matter how genuine I wanted to be as a CEO, I could never do that with this thing looming over me, which is like, it's all about driving numbers. It's all about, like conforming. And it was right back to that thing where it's like me as scared as much imposter syndrome as I have, me worried about what day my neck's going to be, on the chopping block in that
Mhm.
environment. I was like, nah, I'll just cut myself right here.
Well, it's exactly opposite of what you said you wanted when you were looking for a position, right? Like you said you
Yeah.
wanted to feel secure. You wanted to feel that you didn't have to, worry about what was happening next or whatever, because at the end of the day, then that is exactly what you're thinking about. And, kudos to you for actually bringing that to your forefront of your mind of knowing like, hey, yeah, if they can do that or they're going to make me do that so soon or so easily, very on, then it's very, very not far fetched that they're going to do the exact same thing to me or keep continuously doing it as you're going forward. And yeah, you were early on. So if they're asking you to do that early, how far are they going to go, right? Ultimately, and push that forward. So I guess in that point, like after you get done with Autel, did you have anything like, because I know, you went to DSLR Pros right after that.
No,
No.
that
Oh,
is
no?
actually not true.
That is
Yeah.
not true.
So
Okay.
there's a part of the story that is missing from my LinkedIn and part of the story that's missing from the public because it just never worked.
Yeah.
So, um, the place I was going to go before I selected Autel, I went back to that CEO of that company and I was going to take a pretty substantial position within that company. And I was like, hey, man, it didn't work out. And this CEO said, I saw the post that you made about Autel because I did make a departure post there was
Yep.
like over 100,000 impressions on LinkedIn. And I don't know why to that level, but I laid it out there kind of what happened. And I don't know, maybe that was inexperience at the
Mhm.
time, or maybe that was frustration at the time, but I don't really regret it. But he's like, you need to take it down. I was like, no chance. Like, I need to tell that
Wow.
story. I need to, I need to control the narrative and not let it become something that it wasn't, not let people assume it was something that it wasn't. And so that CEO and I really had a falling out because of that, because I was just
Yeah.
like, not doing it. And he's like, all right, man, well, I can't have you working for me if that's how it's going to be. I was like, fine, see you
Yeah.
later.
Right.
So that was another dagger in all of this. So I ended up going and working for Atlas Dynamics, which is now Atlas UAS, which is a Latvian tricopter company. They were part of this. How I ended up knowing them and getting to know them is an interesting story, but I won't share it because it involves some private information about another company that was going to do some work with them. Um, but they were like, "Yeah, we want you, 100%. We want you to come and run this thing, bring the technology to the U.S." I was like, cool. So uh, they're basically, I was there for 6 months getting paid to do nothing, like literally nothing. I was just like, you let me know when I can do something because I couldn't sell or market their product until it got FCC certification. And in
Mhm.
6 months, they couldn't get FCC certification on their radio. So I would just like spend my days being sad about not contributing to the world, like thinking my kids just are gonna grow up watching their dad do nothing because there was nothing I could do. And after 6 months, I was just like, look, like, stop paying me. We're gonna not do this. And so that's when I joined DSLR Pros. So being a part of Atlas for 6 months is something that there was just no reason to share that because I couldn't do anything. Um,
Yeah.
Somewhere in here, I have a lot of like these are all my stories here, and I have like stuff over here from I have lots of things in my office that this is a Mary Kate and Ashley Olsen movie I'm in.
Nice.
There's lots
You're
of
in the
things
movie?
in my yeah.
Where are you, what movie? What I gotta
So
we gotta talk.
it's called Getting There. I live in Salt
Okay.
Lake City. It's a it's about them getting their driver's licenses and driving from California to Utah for the 2002 Olympics.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
so my mom, my actual mom, is their chaperone in the movie. Like they had to have
Really
like an adult chaperone, and so she's like the one like being like, "Okay, don't be late for this thing." But yeah, like I was just there, so I was in the movie as well. But fun fact,
nice.
Mary Kay and Ashley Olsen were born on the literal exact same day as me, so we were born like some hours apart. So like meeting them and hanging out with them and finding that was kind of like a cool thing. And I just think it's
That is
like,
cool.
yeah, it's fun.
That's sweet.
Like
Yeah.
everything behind me and everything I have in my office has like a legitimate story to it.
Yeah, that's the
Um,
way it should be, right? You gotta show those off. I same, but I'm just in the studio here because it's just, focused in,
yeah,
but
yeah,
I gotta
for
change it
sure.
up because it's good to have those things. It's funny because my sister and I, we were close too, but she made me watch all those Mary Kay and Ashley movies, so I've definitely seen that movie, but now I kinda wanna go
Yeah,
back and watch to see
definitely.
you and see
You'll
your mom in it, but that's awesome.
I'll just send you the I'll send you the best clip of when you can see
Yeah,
me hanging out.
do it, that
This
would
is
be
my
great.
fantasy football trophy, and this is a card that kind of was at our fantasy draft that led to my fantasy football trophy. This is my Autel Robotics CEO placard. This
Nice.
is a award I got from Fleer. There's an award I got from DJI back here. Like I take my journey very seriously, and I'm a sentimental person in general. The reason I said that is I'm sure I have something from Atlas somewhere. Uh, I don't
That's
know.
cool.
I used to have a pilot patch over somewhere. Anyways, Atlas was
Nice.
a thing. DSLR Pros was, Mike Zaya, the CEO of DSLR Pros, was one of my closest pals and greatest supporters throughout my entire journey. Um, Going and working for them, I was only there for a year and a half, and it completely like it really like is unfortunate because it impacted our friendship a lot working together.
Yeah.
And it was a situation I kind of needed to get out of. Then I went to Workhorse at the kind of behest and request of Brandon DeClet, who was the former CEO of Ag Eagle and Measure, who was on their board at the time. That was kind of like an interesting transitionary thing as Anzu Robotics was being kind of thought out, born, discussed what could happen with that. So those were happening in parallel. So like I mentioned in
You
that
had
post, six. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, so you had already known, like, hey, I'm taking this next workhorse, journey on my career of like as just a stepping stone to really get to Anzu to actually be a part or to launch, or was it more so
So
like, hey, I had to kind of leave DSLR Pros because you felt a strain with the relationship, or
yeah,
how did that kind of?
I felt like I needed to leave DSLR Pros because it was just like there it's complicated and there's a lot of like
Yeah,
I mean I love those guys. I try to make it better. I'm still very close with their entire team, but Mike and I still need to reconcile somehow. Um, but yeah, so Anzu was an idea, and I was a part of that idea, but I was not supposed to be the one running it up until probably January or February. I was not going to be the one running it. And then it was like,
yeah,
well, Workhorse ended at the same time. And I was just like, well, I could do it. And it's like, all right, we're going to do it. So then I think it was like starting of March is when it really kicked off that I was going to be the guy. Um, Again, that's not what the intention was. I was a part of all of the planning, but I was just part of it, if that makes sense. So
yeah,
Workhorse could have lasted longer. What we found early on is Workhorse was going to sell their drone division off, and so I was very much a part of that whole thing. And then once that sold, I didn't know if I was going to move to another industry or if I was going to take some time off. or if Anzu was going to materialize. But there were a lot of times in the Anzu process where we were like, maybe this isn't going to happen for one reason or another. So, yeah, just kind of worked out that way.
Yeah, so I got, and you just felt, I mean, in some ways, you don't, I guess, need to get into too much detail on that, but like you and another person had this idea of starting Anzu, and the idea and maybe it wasn't Anzu at the time, right? But it was an idea of actually, you know, doing what you're doing with the drones and repurposing DJI technology, and putting that out there. But was it something that just, I would love to know how it all came together of like, because you had these relationships in the past, right? You had these
Mm.
partnerships with many resellers, Chinese manufacturing drone companies. I kind of feel like there's a lot of synergies throughout your kind of career of being a part of a Chinese market or a Chinese company in some way with manufacturing drones. And then for the idea to be kind of taking the opposite approach in some ways, right? Of like, hey, using that technology, but making sure that if anything made, and maybe that wasn't the idea of where it stemmed from, of like, hey, any regulations changing or anything like that. What was that initial idea of like
Yeah.
what Anzu was gonna be, right? Like what was your Adidas shoe? Like what shoe were you gonna be? Like why was this
Yeah.
the idea that you wanted to run with?
So what we're looking at today is legislation that's at the federal level that's talking about a ban of DJI entirely. But what we were talking
Yep.
about 14 months ago is like sales of DJI have gone down substantially in states like Florida and Mississippi, where there's state legislation that's precluding government funds from purchasing DJI drones or Chinese manufactured drones. So the question at the time, the first conversation that led to Anzu was like, what can we do? And it was like, well, what if you manufactured somewhere else? What if you went down the blue route? You move more componentry out of China, blah, blah, blah. And what it turned into is, well, myself and my business partners, we have the resources to build something up. We have funding, we have know-how, we have relationships, we have contacts. All we need is the technology. So what if we license that technology and manufacture it in Malaysia and do all this other software stuff? It, like I said, like things almost didn't happen multiple times because there's certain things where like you can't control this. You can't tell me how to do this. You can't, this is not
Mhm.
DJI extended. This is you licensing your technology, and then we get to be the company we want
Whatever
to
you want.
be.
Yeah.
Um, and so once we got that figured out, right? We got the product, we got the software partners with Aloft, which have made it so that we could claim data security on that. Um, then it was really a matter of, like you're talking about, identity. When we launched the product, we knew we had a green drone that people were going to be like, "What the hell is this color?" We knew that. We looked at it ourselves and we're like, "This is not what we thought it was going to be." But we had a choice at that time to delay launching for months, or and wait for new production, or just lean into it. And so the identity was going to be accepting who we are, accepting that we are licensing technology, trying to do that very difficult job of explaining the nuances of that licensing agreement, the nuances of how we are different, making justifications of why the pricing is more when you're getting basically the same drone. Like there's a lot of things we had to take on. And really, the identity, the Adidas shoe is I'm in the pit with the people all the
Yeah.
time. Like when you see a performer jump off the stage and get in the crowd, that's where I live. I live as a CEO of Anzu Robotics, talking and hanging out with the people that are potential customers. That's it. And so when
Yep.
they have questions, when they have criticism, when I'm getting blown up on LinkedIn by cybersecurity drone hackers, and when I'm getting asked the same question about the color green or the name Anzu or whatever, it's like I'm in it and I don't complain. It's what I signed up for. That is the Adidas shoe of Anzu. Is like we're going to be. I've said this analogy before, but it's like FUBU back in the 90s. For us, by us. You have a company, a drone company, that what we're trying to do is allow you, the drone user, to tell us what you want us to do. The base level technology is great. What do you want us to do to take it to the next level? How can we make this better? What are the
Yeah.
security needs of your organization or your state, your legislation that we need to fix or need to address so that you can reliably take this affordable, quality drone technology and run with it long term? And so to do that, it requires not not knowing anything and letting everyone else basically fill in the blanks for us.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's a, great way to look at it in that way. And I appreciate you sharing the identity because it's always you brought it up, and I was curious on how that kind of came about. But why the Raptor and the Raptor T? Why those models to start? I'm curious if like,
Yeah.
I mean, great drones, obviously, right? You have the
Mm.
RTK module on it as well, but like, um, why were those the first two you wanted to start with?
Yeah, so we have exclusivity arrangement with DJI for this licensing agreement on DJI Enterprise products. So when you look at
Yep.
DJI Enterprise, basically when we're talking about the largest scale, the drones that sell the most, Mavic form factor is what sells the most. We didn't do a multispectral because we figured we would miss the start of the growing season. Plus, we thought that multispectral users were less sensitive to the existing legislation, whether it's state or federal, because most farmers aren't buying their drones through federal or state tax funding. So
Yeah.
we started with an enterprise and thermal because we knew we had a large reach. It also, like when you look at the M350, for instance, you have to build all these payloads, and that's like impossible. Plus, they sell at a much smaller number. We weren't sure that would work, but we were certain that this Mavic form factor would work to some extent. But we definitely did not see the flood of demand that we've seen since we've started, and then we did not see countering CCP in this current proposed legislation, which completely flings the door wide open for us to fill a gap and to really serve a much larger base of customers that's just not cops and firefighters in a state that can't use Chinese drones. It becomes much bigger than that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I want to ask it just because I'm curious from your thoughts of like, and I don't, maybe forgive me if you've talked about this before or not, and maybe just ignorance on my part of not knowing. But is there any way that the CCP, like PDA, like actual language would eventually define Anzu as a subsidiary or an affiliate in some way?
So, in no way could we be a subsidiary or affiliate because there's no co ownership and there's no control. By definition, legal definition, we are not a subsidiary of DJI. That would be like Zenmuse or an affiliate like Hasselblad, which Hasselblad is
Yeah,
one that I think is really complicated because Hasselblad being a Swedish company, cameras like well established, like them being an affiliate of DJI, what is that going to do to that brand in the United States? It's a
yeah,
it's actually a crazy question for me to think about. But we are not any of those. We are a separate company with a licensing agreement. A licensing agreement is not enough to determine or to define us as an affiliate or a subsidiary. However, we're talking about current language. I think that Congresswoman Stefanik has an idea. She knows who we are, and she has this idea that we're a problem. The thing is that I think that no politician or no lawmaker should be able to just say, I think they're a problem, therefore they're a problem. We have a
right,
licensing agreement with DJI, sure. But I'm an American citizen. My partners are all American citizens. We don't get any funding from DJI. We're not paying them continually. We just have a licensing agreement, and that's it. We're trying to serve the American public, as you've seen with LIDA and drone responders and all these like public safety folks coming out and saying, "Don't take our drones away." Well, if they take their drones away, like why would they take away their ability to buy a Malaysian manufactured, U.S. owned drone just because it's licensed from DJI? I think that that's where it will get very complicated. I think the
yeah,
amendments that they could write up for that would be like you can't transact with these companies, but that would then make it so that anyone that's on an entity list couldn't have any transactions with a U.S. company. And I'm sure there's lots and lots and lots of transactions that exist. Maybe it's not integration into products that are coming into the US, but we're talking about something much
right,
bigger than just drones and much bigger than just us. So I feel like that is so complicated and so like they would have to prove something. And if the FBI came and investigated Anzu Robotics, they would find that It's not a shell company. It's not funded by DJI. It's just a good business idea, and that's it. So being judged on the actualities, I think that will be just fine. But
Yeah.
you know, skepticism and stuff, it's like, oh, well, we're not sure about this. Okay, you don't have to be sure about it. If it comes down to the point that we have to disclose certain things, like I'm down to do it. But
Yeah.
that's why I feel pretty confident that there's nothing that Anzu has to worry about
Yeah.
short term or long term.
Yeah, and hopefully not, right? I mean, and that's obviously, like we talked about in the beginning, it's fluid, it's changing all the time. There's a lot
Yeah,
to unpack there, and obviously, there's a lot of good resources out there to kind of follow all of that that's going on in that legislation as well. So, Randall, I really appreciate you being on today and kind of sharing more in depth of about you and your story and how you kind of went around your career. So I won't hold you up for too long anymore. I know you're a busy guy as well. So um, thanks again for being here. The only other thing I usually like to close with is, anything that you want to put out there is like who to connect with, how people can
yeah.
reach you. Always about putting it out there and seeing. You never know who might be listening.
Yeah, for sure. So I would first encourage anybody that wants to get in touch with me directly. My email is Randall at anzurobotics.com. That's Randall at anzurobotics.com. If you go to anzurobotics.com, look at our FAQ section. I take that very seriously as frequently asked questions about our company. You can learn a ton going through that. If you look at our blogs, they're not just fluffy blogs, they're blogs that tell a story. We have a blog about our cybersecurity things that we've done to forward cybersecurity, one about our licensing agreement with DJI and what that licensing agreement entails. So there's lots of information on our website. I think it's worth looking at, not just specs on the drones, but who we are as a company. Um, so again, like reach out to me, and I would, from my journey in the drone space, if you are someone that is looking for the next step, the next company, and you're looking at, you know, where you might land next, lean on me because I'm happy to make introductions within my network to help you find that next place. I'm happy to give you ideas of how you might further your career in the drone space, whether it's brand new or you've been in for a while and you're just looking to do something different. I have spent the last 9 years bringing people into this industry, helping them find their next spot, and it's like my favorite part. And I know that for me, my imposter syndrome makes it so that I'm like, oh man, am I good enough? Or like, what am I gonna do if this thing doesn't work? That's the drone space. Like we're all under threat right now, whether our jobs stay stable or not, unless you work for like three drone manufacturers in the US. You're probably loving life with the way things are looking. Um, like I have ideas. I have places that I know are looking for quality people. So if you're listening to this and you're like, yeah, that that resonates with you, my email is Randall at AnzuRobotics.com. Let me work for you and help you find the next spot for you to take
Love
care of
it.
your families or your future.
Love it, man. No, that's great. That's a great offer, and anybody that's listening, definitely take them up on it, right? If you
Please.
have any interest in advancing or changing up your career in the industry in any way, which is an awesome opportunity. So again, Randall, we'll put all the
Yes,
show
sir.
notes, links in the show notes and everything. But thanks again for being here, and everybody else out there, safe flying, and we'll see you on the next one.
Appreciate you, brother.